ready.
Here we go. How you doing, everybody? This is Dennis Michelson, D-Mike. Welcome to the Science of Fantasy Football. Why the science of fantasy football? Well, you get a meteorologist and a biologist together, and they're going to use the scientific method, which just means they're going to look at statistics in a much smarter way. How can I say that with any assurance in an industry like fantasy football, where there's always a range of outcomes? Well, it just means we're handling statistics in a way that we're letting the statistics guide us to the answer. We're not using statistics to back up some preconceived notion. That's a scientific method. That's what it's all about. Trial and error, a lot of experimentation. And joining me as he does each and every week, he is the professor, after all. It's John Bush. John, welcome back.
Hey, Dennis, great to be here as usual. It's the 5th of July. We roasted yesterday down here in Arkansas, 100 degrees.
Climate change. Climate change is here.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So, yeah, the range of outcomes was roast. So I had my tinfoil hat. You know, you never know what the neighbors are beaming at me here. I'm trying to keep my mind sharp and focused on fantasy here, but I think my neighbors don't like fantasy football. They beam microwaves to me and try to roast me up like an old potato. So anyway, you never know down here. These hillbillies get crazy. I don't know what they're doing. Anyway, it sounded like a war zone out here last night, but my dogs were pretty chill, but they were, setting off all sorts of stuff. We used to have a neighbor, Dennis, that I swear had a damn cannon. It was the loudest. I don't know what gunpowder. I don't know what they were. I don't know if they were doing mock battles. They have a pond behind their house. I was thinking maybe they're doing like naval battles or something. Anyway, they moved, so it's been quieter than usual, but it was pretty loud last night out here. In the woods of Arkansas.
So the cat hates fireworks.
Oh my
Every
goodness.
time they start going off, she tries to find a place to hide. She was hunkered down in my closet last night for most of the night. The dog actually likes fireworks. Like it doesn't bother Ash at all, and which surprises me because Huskies have incredibly, good hearing. But she's out there kind of playing around, loving it, until it got to about 10 to midnight last night. And she had this look on her face that was like, really? Can we stop this? It's past my bedtime. She got irritated by how late they went. But anyway, I joked about climate change because you said it's hot in the summertime.
Woo.
And I know there are people out there that are not familiar yet with my background. I'm not only a meteorologist, so I understand the atmospheric physics part and everything like that, but I'm also have my background in statistical climatology, which is a very unusual combination because the science of meteorology and the science of climatology can be very, very different. But having exposed myself to both of those sciences, I kind of understand this a lot better than I would say folks that are just climatologists or just meteorologists. That doesn't mean they don't know their stuff. It just means that having a good background in both kind of teaches you more disciplines when it comes to the weather. And when people ask me, you go to a party and you meet somebody for the first time and, hey, what did you study in college? I studied meteorology and statistical climatology. Oh, is climate change real? And my answer to that, Professor, what do you think my answer is when they say just, is climate change real?
It changes.
Correct.
It changes.
So my answer is always yes.
Yes.
Climate change is real because our climate on this planet has never stayed the same. And it might interest people. Who figured that out first in the United States? It was Benjamin Franklin, of all people. And he wasn't even educated as a meteorologist, but He loved weather, and he charted weather his whole life. And so when the United States was first born, and he was kind of influential behind the scenes, the National Weather Service idea of changing the normal temperatures for a location based on 30 years of data, that was Ben Franklin, for crying out loud, and it's still being used today. But climate change is real. Man's effect on the climate is real. That doesn't take a big leap in logic as a meteorologist or a statistical climatologist. It's all about experimentation. Because when I was at Purdue, they made a mini atmosphere, if you will, closed circuit atmosphere, so they could study it. And they increased different things. And they could change the temperature structure within that closed system. We have a mostly closed system here in the United States with our atmosphere. Yeah, we leak some stuff out to outer space and all that kind of stuff, but we know what the percentages of heat loss and all that kind of things are. We've done the math. We've understood that. So man is affecting that. So when you hear in the news, 97% of meteorologists agree with man-made climate change. Okay, first of all, they got that statistics in a very, shall we say, cherry-picking statistic way from papers that were done, and the actual number is not as impressive. But even if you took that number at face value, I'd like to know the 3% of the idiots who say that man isn't changing the climate, because we have anthropological proof that man is screwed with the climate over the years. Within the lifetime of mankind, long before fossil fuels came along, overdoing the deforestation of places has changed climates over the years. So man affects the climate, but getting back to the fantasy football part of this, it's all about the range of outcomes and single data points. I have been going nuts this past week because Hurricane Beryl, biggest hurricane, most powerful hurricane this early in the season ever. Of course, ever only goes back really like 50 years, because before that, storms could sneak up on us. A lot of the records down on the islands are really bad. So there may have been storms before we had satellite pictures that went unreported, or the government was overthrown and the records were gone. So 50 years. In 50 years, biggest storm we have ever seen this early in the season. The temperatures over the Atlantic and in the Gulf are incredibly high. The water temperatures, they're incredibly high. Is that climate change? The answer is simple. We don't know. Is Beryl a response to climate change? We don't know. It's when you only have a single point of data and you don't have many other data points over 50 years, 50 years is just a blink of the eye of how long our climate has been changing. I get so frustrated, Professor, when I see either in horse racing, in fantasy football, or in weather, or any other scientific thing or field, if I see 1 point worth of data being used, we had a recent case on the biology side of things. Let's say that the worst fears of these COVID vaccines were correct. I don't know if they are. Like, we won't know for another probably 20 or 30 years what the side effects were and all these other things, and whether they were even more effective than doing nothing at all. We have no way of knowing that, first of all, in a lot of cases, because we're not going to do the testing because it's inhumane. But even if you proved one vaccine was garbage, would that mean that every vaccine ever developed was garbage? That's the single point theory of data in any subject, including fantasy football, drives me crazy.
Well, uh, I think the polio vaccine is pretty good. We
Oh,
don't
yeah.
see we don't see people with iron lungs.
Nope.
Just talk to your great grandparents or your
Oof.
grandparents. They uh, things people wouldn't swim. There was just all sorts of things happen. Uh, Smallpox.
Yeah.
If you want to see fear, just see what smallpox can do. There's a lot of data that needs to be looked at with anything in biology. It's a system with effects. They call them multi-level effects or second order, third order. We don't even know. It's kind of like a black box. We don't know what we don't know and all
Thank
that.
you.
And so, we're just trying to get some clarity about our immune system and how vaccines interact. And of course, there's the genetics, right? Some people are probably super responders, right? Some
Yep.
people don't respond. It's the distribution of a population. The bell curve concept, we're assuming that's the distribution. Not every distribution is, in fact, a bell curve. Fantasy football data is not bell curve. It is more logarithmic than anything. It's skewed. The best players on average tend to show up in the first, second rounds, depending on quarterback, tight end. There may be second, third, but running back and wide receiver, in other words, if the best RBs only showed up in the 10th round, 11th, 12th, what would people do? They wouldn't, they'd be drafting anything else. And then in the 10th and 11th, you'd have everybody going crazy to grab one. Okay. That's not how it works, right? We're fighting tooth and nail to get the few elites as quick as possible, right? Foraging, hoarding, and that tends to be in the early versus the late, the old concept of the sleeper. But the one data point, Dennis, in biology and field biology, call it like I don't know, a giraffe or something. There's this, out there in the plains, and we're thinking lions and tigers, well, not lions, and you have one giraffe. You see a neck, and you're like, well, wow, okay, what does that mean? Well, what could it mean? It could mean that that is a wounded animal and the herd's been gone and the lions are moving towards it. It could be the herd is asleep and that's the first one to woke up because you maybe disturbed it and it's looking around. One giraffe above the weeds doesn't tell you. There's lots of possibilities that could be stuck in mud. You don't know what it means here. But on the other hand, it doesn't take but one data point on some things, Dennis. You go like this. Some cats, and I've seen this on YouTube, and it's got to be real. Unless they fake the video, which could be. But these people, I guess researchers, I don't know if they were like TikTok artists. Anyway, they put on a zebra suit and we're going to go march around with the zebras. Well, the lions show up and you're thinking, okay, here goes the zebras, and the dudes in the zebra suit a little bit slow. So if you're a lion, you're thinking, those are fast. This one's slow. So the lion comes over and the dudes went nuts and they threw the head off the suit, and the lion grabbed the head and ran, and these dudes shuck that suit and were running. I've seen the video. So Dennis, one, I probably wouldn't even need this data point, okay, but I've seen it now. I would never wear a zebra suit on the Serengeti plains and march around to see what would happen, okay. It's what is the FAFO, right? You F around and you F out. Well,
Yep.
so just realize every once in a while, one data point does, does enlighten you a little bit. But I want to think, no, I think I'm going to let somebody else, do that experiment. But I don't know, Dennis, go and look at it. And our listeners, y'all can go find it. It was stupid, but that's a lot of those, people try to, like the fireworks, the dude, I don't know, I saw this yesterday. He must have 300 sparklers. And I remember as a kid that the parents, oh, that's kind of safe. Yeah, well, until the sparkler landed on your hand, then it burned the crap out of you. And but relative, okay, but go play with sparkler. 300 in your hand and light them all at once, Dennis. Uh, that's going to cause an issue. This is, I think, magnesium or something. It's very volatile. What makes a sparkler, and when you light 300 all at once in your hand, something tells me there's going to be a finger or a hand or something missing. I don't need that data point either. So that would be one data point that I did see that I did learn my lesson on.
Yeah, and here's the thing, folks, is that everything having to do, I mean, any outcome in anything you're trying to forecast is always a range of logical outcomes. If you cannot look at a player in fantasy football and come up with 3 reasons that player could be really good this year, and 3 reasons that they could fail to live up to expectations, you're fooling yourself. Because even the number 1 player, my safest fantasy football player in all of the league this year, Christian McCaffrey, was such a unicorn the last 2 years in weekly value.
Dennis, he's done something I've never seen in my data.
Oh, he's one of one.
Yeah,
in,
one of
in
one.
what he's doing. But I come up with 3 points, 3 reasons right
outside
now.
of injury.
Well, injury's one of them.
Yeah, okay. Injury's always
one of them.
If you're a running back.
Nope. Number 2 is a drop in volume. Because
yeah, they may want to save him, or you could see him say, we're going to take him easy until week 7 or whatever, like they did Breece Hall.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
We saw that with Breece Hall.
Correct.
I drafted Breece Hall. The COM values, my metric on that weekly, it said Breece Hall was the dog to get, and he was, but first few weeks, I think 6 or 7, he just didn't live up to it. They didn't let him go. They had him chained down. And then think about it, he's number 2 right now, Dennis, or so, because of what he did from about, I don't know, week 7, 8. I don't, people would know that, but later in the season versus earlier.
Yeah, and that's the thing with Christian McCaffrey. Are they going to do sort of the term load management is used in the NBA now, where guys sit out games? Are we going to see a load management situation with Christian McCaffrey to keep him fresh for the playoffs? Are they going to want to go a little bit easier? Because last year at this time, or going into week 1, Elijah Mitchell was battling some injuries. Nobody else emerged as a reliable second running back on San Francisco. So McCaffrey got the volume. He got fed as much volume as he could stand because there wasn't anything else that was there to take the load off of him. This year they drafted Garendo. Mitchell's back and healthy, and they kept him around. So if they go into the season week 1 with 3 healthy running backs and they get a sizable lead, which is possible, why would they keep pounding Christian McCaffrey? Why not get him out of there, save the legs, save the threat of injury? Because every time a player gets hit, they have a chance of injury. It's just that simple, folks. Every time you get tackled, you have a chance of injury. This is not rocket science. This is not, an amazing revelation that I'm making. So the less volume you get early in the season, maybe that keeps you fresher come playoff time. The other third reason, so we got injury, we got volume drop. The third one is, what if San Francisco's offense isn't as good as it's been the last couple of years? What if teams figure Brock Purdy out? And they figure out, they look at the tape from the Super Bowl and they say, here's how Kansas City shut this guy down when it mattered. And they go ahead and they figure Brock Purdy out, and he doesn't make the adjustments, and the offense drops in weekly value. So those are three things, and that's the best player. That's the safest fantasy football player. I said tongue in cheek a couple weeks ago, if you have the very first pick in a one quarterback draft and you do not draft Christian McCaffrey, that is fantasy football malpractice. He's been that great over the last couple years combined. But that you can still come up with three things. And if somebody out there in the fantasy football world wants to have a great lesson on range of outcomes in forecasting, go to the National Hurricane Center's website, and you can find it by weather.gov. Click on hurricanes, it'll take you right there. Read the forecast discussions for Hurricane Beryl. Read the range of outcomes that is built right into the forecast. Right in the discussion, Professor, they even show their work. They show their error out to 3 days. They show their error days 4 and 5.
Well, the cone gets bigger.
The cone gets bigger because storms are unpredictable. Just like fantasy football players are unpredictable. The farther you get from that first week, the more uncertainty. That first week of the season, I can tell you, if I was to bet on one running back to score more than 20 points in PPR, I'll pick Chris McCaffrey all day long. If you ask me who's going to be the best in week 14 this season, I'm going to maybe hedge my bets on that. You know, if I had $100 to proportion across the whole league, I'd probably put 70 on CMC of scoring more than 20. That's how positive I am, and I won't even worry about the defensive matchup week 1. That's how high I feel on him. But by week 14, my cone of uncertainty gets greater. But when we show our work in fantasy football, Professor, maybe we need to show our error, just like they do with the National Hurricane Center. There are no better hurricane forecasters in the world. No, not on TikTok, not on Twitter. There are no better. Their worst forecaster at the National Hurricane Center is better than I am. Their absolute worst. And I've been doing this over 40 years. They're so specialized. They are the experts. And as a matter of fact, they really nailed the forecast with Beryl because they are one of the last National Weather Service offices that's allowed to use a man-machine mix. They don't have to go with the models. They can use all of the models, spaghettimodels.com. You can see all the models for any hurricane. But they use that consensus building concept along with dynamics and understanding the dynamics of the atmosphere, understanding what the flow is in the atmosphere. And they use that guidance. And the more model uncertainty there is with time, the more they lengthen that cone out. The cone's not a natural size. The cone is what the cone is, and the cone will get really big the more uncertainty there is with a storm. And that's the way we have to think about fantasy football, a range of logical outcomes. The greatest hurricane forecasters in the world wouldn't bet on that location within 150 miles out to 5 days. the best fantasy football forecasters in the world shouldn't be any more confident for this season.
A couple comments. The betting the $100. I've talked about this a few times on the podcast. There's a book on it, and there was a bunch of people on predictions, the Good Judgment Project, and I participated one year, and what we were allowed to do was kind of the $100. Okay, you got $100. We're going to give you a series of things to predict, and you put your money on what you're confident about and things you're least confident. So it was kind of weighted. You got to change that. And that's what, in horse racing, the pari-mutuel, that's what it is as well. I mean, there's always, that first gray horse of the day is going to get some attention,
Yes.
Going on turf, or what is it? What was it? Big ass on grass, right? The biggest horses have more power on the grass. I've heard that one, Dennis, or the frisky jockey. They're thinking, okay,
White socks in the slop.
there you go, whatever, and so in a pari-mutuel system, you look at the win, it's not all on one horse. The
No.
money is distributed, and that's the hardest thing that I'm still working on there. I'm not a master of that at all. Annie Duke, the poker player, she wrote
Ooh.
Thinking in Bets, and
Yes.
and a great book. And think about probabilities. Poker players, it's like almost like if you've seen A Beautiful Mind, we saw these equations flying up, and
Oh, yeah.
always imagine those poker players, all these probabilities and range of outcomes, and that's, I wish I had. My mind is not beautiful, Dennis. It's old and tired. It's too much crawfish and too much Cajun spice is wore it down. It's kind of a little bit rusty. Kind of like some of those old fishing hooks that old bait you hadn't used in a while. You need to sharpen it back up. And I'm going to be sharp by mid-August, Dennis. After the expo, I'm going to be hitting it hard. So the stuff I'm doing in best ball, I'm just sharpening up a little bit, trying to figure it out. I got Dennis's metrics. I'm listening to what he's saying. I'm figuring things out. And that's the hardest thing that I would say. And I think it takes multiple seasons and seasoning. And I'm and the second issue is about week 2 or 3, you're going to see on Twitter, people are never playing fantasy because it doesn't work out. Somebody's going to get hurt, or they're completely wrong about, say, Bijan Robinson. I don't know. Somebody's not going to be getting the volume, and they're going to be mad. It's like, well, why am I even drafting them in the second round? It's like we're almost promising, yeah, it's second round, so you could be It's like, here's your piece of cake, and this is the size, and don't be, this is how, it's like, investing in bonds. It's all safe. It was all safe until the Great Depression. So everything's safe until it's not. But I'm telling you, watch about 2 or 3 week people. I'm never playing this game again. Just like in horse racing, the 1 to 5, and the jockey falls off, and people are tearing tickets up, and these thieves. I mean, you could hear all sorts of colorful language from people who put their mortgage. Now they got to go home to the family and explain, they're going to be living in the street here, because the jockey fell off the horse. So, Dennis, that's the second. Those are the 2 points. Thinking in probability, and there's going to be some sour grapes or some sadness about week 2 or 3 when those first, second round, third round, whatever it is, it's not living up, and they hadn't won 3 in a row, and they're going to be down 0-3, and they're going, I'm just going to quit. I'm just going to tank, or this is dynasty. Well, I'm going to get even at that commission or whatever. And, these, folks, it's coming. And, that's another reason in dynasty, Dennis, I'm suspicious. I wouldn't do a family league because I'd have to kill somebody. So, trades and, they'd be mad. I couldn't take my nerves couldn't take it. I'd have to beat them or I'd get beat. So anyway.
Yeah, and people make such outlandish statements, and I don't care what the subject matter is, but first of all, there's no such thing as a lock. Okay. We know from horse racing,
Woo, that's
there's no
true.
such thing as a lock. But a guy bet me his kidneys
Yeah.
that that DeAndre Swift wouldn't finish in the top 35
Oh my goodness.
of running backs. And I quickly retorted, in weekly value, you're gonna owe me 2 kidneys, because he'll stumble his way to a top 30 in weekly value. Now, will he be in total points? I don't know. I don't know if he's going to play 17 games or 12 games or whatever, but I know he's probably going to play more than 10 games, which is what qualifies him for my weekly value stats of making the top 30. He's going as the 23rd running back right now. And in my opinion, that's closer to his absolute floor of 25th than it is to his absolute ceiling that's probably close to 10th.
He's I just downloaded the latest. I hadn't even have time to tell you this, Dennis, pre-show. I got the latest ADPs from FFPC.
Ooh.
He's 76. I don't know. You may have just said that. I'm asleep. But the com value that I got is 50%. So that means that basically 8 weeks he was above median for running backs, which is nice. That's in the top tier. I'm pretty loose on the top tier, but if you can bring home 8 weeks of goodness, I'm going to be pleased with you in the 7th round, Dennis.
Oh my goodness.
Well, Zamir White's down there and he gets a 20%. So he got about 2 weeks, maybe 3. So let's see, Swift got 8 last year. White got 2 or 3. Okay. Harris got 41%. Okay. Okay, maybe, but he's in the 7th. So see, would I take Swift or Harris? Well, if I missed on Swift, I would consider Harris at 41%.
Yep.
I mean, Moster is at 53, right at the 7-8 junction. Okay. Those are the things I'm thinking about. Pollard's down in the 9th at 47. Those are things that interest me. Doesn't mean that I'm thinking any of those is a lock, as we just talked about. But I know what they did last year, and of course I got the cheat sheet. See, I can see Dennis's metric as well as mine, and we'll update all this next couple weeks, folks, and maybe even talk about it. Dennis, I didn't even have time to see what's changed here on my patterns or anything. I just did this today. So I'm in my 3rd wave of best ball beta tests, Dennis. I'm going to take 10 and I'm going to draft quarterbacks from about the 10th round down. That's where I'm going to start. So the 2nd wave was about 6, 7, probably 6. And the first one was the elite 2 or 3. So my waves this year are early quarterback, kind of mid, kind of what the metrics tell me about 6th round. And then this is I'm forcing it. I'm going to make myself try to find that surprise, and so just jumping ahead. So I'm talking Tua, Caleb Williams, Herbert, Stafford, Cousins. Those are going to be some of the ones, Mayfield, Watson, some of those that are a little thinner out there. They're a little bit deeper. So I'm going to have to make things happen. Probably take a couple quarterbacks back to back kind of thing is probably what I'm going to have to do. If I can grab, say, Caleb Williams and Herbert, or Tua and, Cousins or something, I'm going to have to mix and match. So the only thing, Dennis, when you do science, you think about variables. I just realized that next year I'm going to have to do these same three, but I'm going to have to reverse the order because I know a lot more now than I did
Yes.
in May.
Yes.
So I'm wondering what an early quarterback would do now in the third wave versus a late quarterback in late May and early June.
And what
See,
you might
see,
need to,
Dennis, I may have to flip around a little bit on this, or maybe change some more experiments. But folks, you're saying, oh, you're talking 2 or 3 seasons before? Yes, I know it sounds corny and well, I don't have that patience. Well, you probably should be invest a lot of money if you don't have, you know, years of patience. So I'm warning you now. Got to have patience.
and here's the thing, Professor, you might need to look at that strategy and say, okay, I'm going to do 10, 10, and 10, but maybe I need to do one from each at the
Yeah, I
same
could.
time.
I could even yes, I
And,
could do
and
it that way.
that way it spreads it out. Right now, I've got a different beta test going. And the reason I'm doing a different beta test is because I'm looking at different variables. Right now, I started my set of best ball drafts where the first 10 rounds I am drafting as if I'm in a redraft league. So
Nice.
I'm changing up the beta test a little bit to use it in replace of mock drafts to say, what is my strategy going to be? Understanding that the 11 people I'm competing against are not all doing it the same way. So it's not a pure test. It'd only be a pure test if all 12 of us were doing our things the same way. But it's as close to a beta test as I can get for this concept without contacting all 12 people and all other 11 people in the league and saying, here, let's pretend this is redraft. I don't know how many are pretending it's redraft. I don't know how many are just great best ball players. I don't care. The test I'm using is, how is the player distribution going? And it'll give me my first guess of how well I will do in a real redraft league. I'm not going to use this as the gospel, but it's part of my way of philosophically looking at my strategy for each position. And Professor, at quarterback, my philosophy of how I play in 2024 is very different than how I played in 2014 or how I played in 2004 or how I even played in 1994, because I've been doing this more than 30 years. I've been playing fantasy football. Your philosophy has to always evolve.
I just thought I'd share while I was here because I am videoing this, so people may want to. Here's the first couple of rounds with the COM data, Bush figure, weekly value percentile, uh, MVP percentile, and then best. So Dennis has 3 metrics. I have 2. You can see things. And Dennis, we weren't planning on this, but I forgot to tell you I did this. So uh, let's hit this, and then let's talk about your philosophy of us folks. Dennis and I could talk all damn night. We could pop the moonshine and just have a great old time. And if you are at the expo, come find us. We're going to be the weird looking duo here. I'll probably have either a biology shirt on or maybe a comic book shirt. I like comic books and whatnot. So I don't know. There's no telling. I do have a Skeletor hat, Dennis, from
Oh,
He-Man.
I love it.
I don't. Yeah. So I may wear my Skeletor hat. That because my rule when I go to say I went to a Rolling Stones concert, I would wear another group like a Led Zeppelin shirt, right? You can't be with the Lemmings. I had to be something different. So, if I'm going to see Willie, was going to see Willie Nelson, I'd have a Whalen shirt on or something. If I was going to see Stevie Ray Vaughan, I'd probably have Howlin' Wolf as my
Oh,
blues man.
he'd
That kind.
actually, he would have appreciated that though.
Oh, well, Howlin' Wolf, he was something else, Dennis. Uh, uh,
So,
anyway,
so getting
uh,
back to the
yeah.
graphic that
So,
you
so yeah.
have,
So I got up here. So, some things that are of interest, Dennis, and is there anybody you want to talk about before we talk about your philosophy first couple rounds that you're worried about, or we all love CMC. Okay. The pros love him. They think he's 113, so the highest RB. They're thinking his end of season's the best ever. They think CeeDee Lamb's the best, and they think Kelsey's the best, and at 114. And Josh Allen and Hurts is 105, Allen is 104. So they're splitting hairs there. But
yeah,
yeah, so is there anybody else you love in the first round or
a-
some?
abs,
Yeah,
absolutely. My guy that is going to be on a lot of my teams again this year.
yeah,
He's been on a lot of my teams the last couple of years, even though he keeps getting more expensive
yeah.
each
The
and
sun
every
god.
damn season.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
I remember when both of us jumped all over him a couple years ago. We were drafting him hand over foot. We were so happy. And then even last year, he was cheap
Yes.
now, first round. Man, you got to pay for he's so good. You got to pay for it, Dennis. No
Yeah.
cheaps anymore. No,
There's
you can't get him on the cheap anymore.
no, there is nothing cheap about him. But here's some interesting thing, and we can go back on and forth on this. I agree with the top three picks in ADP. I can't argue
You
with
like
any of those
McCaffrey,
three guys.
Lamb, and Hill.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's
I
what
can't
the
argue.
that's what the pros like.
No, can't argue with it. Can't argue with it at all. But here's the way I'm using our data this year.
Okay.
And again, this is a beta test. I'm going to be doing this for the Scott Fish Bowl. Okay. If I have a guy that is like first round, look at
Yeah.
your first round
Yep.
picks. Okay.
Yep.
Just as they're going right now.
Yep.
And I see 7 guys who are green all the way across the screen
Yep.
or pretty
Yep.
much
Pretty
so.
much.
Okay. They're all at that, they're all at the top green with the exception of the Bush figure for Justin Jefferson is
Yep.
off a little bit from last
Well,
year, but that was
because
injury.
yeah, yeah,
But if you accept that injury, okay, he's green across the way versus a guy like Bijan Robinson, Brees Hall, Jamar Chase. They got one chink in their armor or one and a half chinks with Jamar Chase and Bijan Robinson. And they're also, so if you're not at that elite green in the first round, where all 5 of those statistical tools love you, and there's still a guy who is loved by all those tools, why wouldn't you take that guy? He's passed 5 different tests. And that's why I say the top 3 guys are not in argument. I'm in total agreement. Then my number 4 guy is Amon-Ra St. Brown.
yeah. I was about. Well, look at the data. The data
Yeah.
would agree with it. In fact, the data, my Bush figure would even flip Brown and Hill.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't have a problem with that either. I right now, I can make a good case that Amon-Ra St. Brown should be the number dynasty fantasy football. CeeDee Lamb's got a contract situation coming up. He might change teams. We don't know what that's going to look like. Dak Prescott might not be his quarterback next year, even if he signs with Dallas. We know Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be with Detroit for a long, long time. He's still under contract for a couple more years. Do you think they're going to let him go?
Oh, no.
Goff is under contract. They're not going to make any changes for the next 3 or 4 seasons. Those are the guys they're riding. Tyreek Hill may not be there in another 3 years. He has said he's done at the end of this contract. I think he might end up playing longer, but we got to take the man at his word. So that's Amon-Ra St. Brown, number 1 wide receiver right now. I really like A.J. Brown, too. I've been taking a lot of A.J. Brown this year, and the metrics all say that is a good move. Now, just because Bijan Robinson's got a yellow and he got a couple of whites by his name where he isn't at that top level, it doesn't mean he's going to be a bad player or a bad choice. It doesn't mean that. It just means there might be some better picks in that first round. And the first few rounds of the draft, Professor, I don't like to make a mistake. Because if you make a mistake, you're instantly playing from behind at every other position. So if I can get a guy who comes up elite using all 5 of our tools, because all 5 of the tools, Professor, or people, they look at something different. And if you add the PPR scaled points in there, that's what the experts at FPPC are
their
saying.
view. That's their opinion.
That's their view. How about a guy that is 6 for 6 on that? Feeling pretty good about him in the first round, aren't you?
Yep, I would be.
So those are the kinds of decisions that I like to look at this big scale of data. The other thing that I'll look at, though, believe it or not, heavy in redraft, I do this. In a dynasty startup, I don't care what the fantasy football playoffs are looking like for this year. Josh Allen has a bad fantasy football playoff schedule, perhaps, because he's got 2 home games and it could snow like the Dickens in Buffalo in December. Jalen Hurts has a much better looking schedule for the fantasy playoffs. Those things I will factor in when it comes to my redraft season. I haven't looked at all of the defensive matchups yet. I will for Scott Fishbowl, because for Scott Fishbowl, that'll be the first league that I draft where I will be factoring in the defense against position and the bye weeks this season. We're not in our redraft making money time of the year yet. I've drafted a few dynasty upstarts. In dynasty, I'm taking the best players because next year, the playoff schedule is going to be different. I don't care what the playoff schedule looks like this year. I just want a competitive team that's going to cash me a check this year. I want to finish top 3. That's all I want to do. I don't care about winning the championship. In redraft, I want to win every championship. So I'm looking, when I get to the redraft season, we're in best ball now. When I get to redraft season, Professor, I will be looking a lot more at the defense against position in those key
and
weeks.
that data is already in the can. The
Yep.
figures are done. I just hadn't, did I send it to you? I don't know if I did.
I believe you did. Yes.
Yeah. So that's already done. I just hadn't made a lesson plans yet because I'm doing other secret stuff. And then still trying to, and I've got to circle around with other secret stuff before. This is my year to do. If it looks like old Bush has been slacking, no, Bush has been doing secret stuff that Dennis knows, but I'm stashing it. It's squirrel. It's kind of like in our acorn pile. You know, we'll pull it out when we need to pull it out, and
And we're working on a lot of stuff,
Oh,
folks, that
who?
is not, it's not ready for prime time yet.
No, it's not.
Okay. But it's stuff that we discuss
Yeah.
every damn week and
Mhm.
every damn day of different things that we can look at. I'm looking at weather and how that affects fantasy scoring. I'm going more in depth with that this year than I have in the past. It doesn't mean I'll have anything that'll be ready for prime time yet. But when we've got a conclusion, when we've got some interesting data, we'll share it with you.
Yep.
Unless it's really secret sauce, and then we're just going to beat you in
Yeah.
leagues and invite you all the time. But
Dennis,
no,
while we're moving, I wanted to get to your philosophy
sure.
articles. Folks, he's done the quarterback and running back, and we've talked about that. So let's start off finally with the tight end, and if we get too tired, we'll do wide receivers next week. Let me pull this up. So this is at Science of Fantasy. Uh, Fantasy football story, Dennis. You're telling us a story. Dennis likes to just give all y'all stuff, all our readers secret stuff. The editors neutral to kind of crabby, depending on what he's saying, and just give it away. And but anyway, Dennis has done it. There's a lot of stuff here. He's Dennis is the bull in the fantasy football China shop, and he's breaking left and right, and you guys get to take advantage. And he's giving you his 30 years of experience in some of these articles here. So why don't you take us through the tight end and tell us whatever you need to tell us, because you talk about basic strategy, differences over time, premium leagues, two tight end leagues, redraft, dynasty, best ball. I don't know, wherever you want to go. It's all there. Dennis speaks of it here in this article. Great article. And you've got, well, like I said, wide receivers. So you've got all four as well.
Yeah, and here's the thing is I'm not going to go over every little bit in this article, but I will give you my basic philosophy, which when it comes to the tight end, it's pretty simple. I want a great tight end on my team because we have seen with your box and whiskers data analysis that those very few, like in every other position, running back, wide receiver, I look at 100 and more in MVP index points as being my elite level. Okay. And then you got your super elites over 120. Even there, even at running back and wide receiver, if my best guy is at the tail end of that group in that 10th to 14th best at running back or wide receiver, I'm not losing a ton of points to anybody except the guy that owns CMC. And there's ways to make up that difference of CMC versus your top running back. And one of the ways to do that is to be the first of your class grabbing a tight end or grabbing the best value at tight end that has the upside to be in that top four. Because over the last couple of years at tight end, we've seen an amazing thing. If you look at the top four guys, they have separated themselves immensely. And quite often, the separation from tight end 1 to tight end 5, or even tight end 2 to tight end 5, has been pretty close to the separation between tight end 5 and tight end 22. Think about that for a minute. If you miss on the top four guys, the next 18 are as good as that fifth guy. That's what the last few years have said in fantasy football. Now, last year, we added Sam Laporta and Dalton Kincaid and had Trey McBride step up. So we might have a population. The population of elite tight ends used to be 3. Used to be Kelsey, who was in a league of his own, then Andrews and Kittle. That for a number of years, those were your top 3 guys, and nobody else was breaking in to that group. Then Hawkinson came along. Then last year, Laporta and McBride came along. And in the last 5 weeks, 6 weeks of the season last year, Dalton Kincaid was there. If you look at his good weather games, Dalton Kincaid was there. He was on weekly value par with any of the top guys. So this year, that elite group has lengthened its way out. I'm not so sure Kittle is hanging on to that elite group. I think he's now in that second tier. Unlike before, you used to have top tier and then everybody else. So 5 to 22 were pretty even. This year, I think you've got 3 or 4 guys at the top. Then you got 3 guys in that next tier, which includes Kittle, and I think it includes McBride. I don't think McBride is going to be in that top elite group like he showed for most of last season, because I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to cut into his volume big time. Plus, it's a change of offensive looks. So I think he will drop down to that second tier. Still wouldn't mind having him on my team, but I don't know if he's elite. But this is the philosophy this is the basic strategy philosophy at tight end. Get yourself an elite one. In the past years, that meant getting the top 3. Last year, it meant getting the top 4. This year, if I miss on those first guys, I might be okay with a second tier guy. If I miss on the second tier guy, I'm waiting.
Dennis, like I said, pros love Kelsey. Laporta, I'm just so it's 114, 106, and then McBride is 94, Kincaid 91, Andrews is at 100, and he's in the 3rd round. So the pros would order it Kelsey, Laporta, Andrews, just and then Ingram's at 96. Their metrics, and wait, Kittle 86. So he's the pros. I think Dennis would argue it's Ingram, Andrews, Laporta, Kelsey, and Kincaid. They've got 5 that seem to be, and then the next level is Pitts and Kittle kind of thing.
Yeah, and I don't have a big argument with that way of looking at it either. When I look at my forecasts of MVP for this year, and MVP is my way of looking at, I like to call it consistency on steroids. Okay, it's looking mostly at upside consistency, and it's also looking at guys that are not going to disappoint you when it comes to having that really bad game. And my top 3 are gonna surprise people a little bit. I have Travis Kelsey on top. That doesn't surprise anybody.
Nope.
But my number 2 guy is Dalton Kincaid. Then I've got another couple points drop, and then it's Trey McBride and Mark Andrews right there in 3 and 4. After those guys, it's Laporta, and he's all by himself in a group until Hawkinson comes back. And when Hawkinson comes back, him and Laporta are pretty even in weekly value. And then it's a drop down to Ingram, Kittle, and Njoku. I am guessing that Brock Bowers will be the next solution, the next guy after that. And then I've got Freiermuth after that. But the key is there's a big drop. But I don't think the drop is as bad as it's been. in the past. So I like the guys like Ingram, Kittle, Njoku, Bowers, Freiermuth, Ferguson, maybe Dallas Goedert. That's my next group that I'm pretty good on. But in one tight end, in tight end premium, I'm going to target either Kelsey or Kincaid. So I either got to be the first one taking a tight end at Kelsey, or I got to go pretty early, end of the second, maybe.
Kelsey's
Probably.
going 15.
Kelsey's going to go
16.
early part of the second.
And Laporta is right there. In fact,
yeah,
you've got Laporta 15, Kelsey 16, McBride 20, Kincaid 23. So that's all second round. So we got 4 tight ends in the second round. And then third round is Andrews and Pitts and Ingram in the fourth round. And then Kittle and Njoku in the sixth round. See, I like value-wise, I like Njoku in the sixth. If I miss,
yep,
then I'm looking. I'm going to skip Pitts. Ingram is suspicious, and I do like that. But if he's gone, then I just hate to invest. I don't know. I think I can get the same show with Njoku in the sixth versus, Ingram in the fourth. So I'm not saying Ingram's not better. It's just value wise, is he that much better versus Njoku in the sixth? I mean, folks, that's why it's an art. It becomes from metrics to art. And that's the hardest thing. Your range of outcomes, we talked about probability. There's the trick. That's getting long in the tooth. Some of us, our minds are not as sharp as our president, but no, I had to say that. Okay. Look, I'm not on politics, but I do have to yuck here. But look, these folks are getting long in the tooth. And anyway, my argument is one last thing on politics, Dennis. If you've won like 10 or 15 fantasy football championships, you should be in the ring to be considered, because I think if somebody's that damn good, especially at high money or making money at the racetrack, that gets my attention. Okay. Somebody said, well, what about the stock market? Well, there's too much inside information, right? All the politicians are buying and selling. So, I want some people who've earned it. And I think fantasy football and horse racing, you have to earn your biscuits there. So there should be how we should elect our leaders, is how good they are at fantasy football or horse racing or something. Well, I don't know. Some other metric. I don't know.
So I'm going to make a political comment.
Oh, Dennis, I didn't mean to open, because I know you like to dabble in that world, and you crank up the people on Twitter.
I think you'll like this analogy, though.
Okay.
So I voted for Joe Biden.
Yeah.
In 1988.
1988. Okay.
1988.
So you were ahead of the curve then.
So I ask you,
yeah,
would I start a running back in fantasy football
from 1988
that I drafted in 1988 or 1998 or even 2008 or how about 2018?
Getting lean there.
Just barely, maybe a guy that I drafted. But here's the key. 1988, I voted for Joe Biden.
Yeah.
That has been a long time ago. I kind of look at the matchup as if I go into the diner and they tell me that the soup of the day, I got the choice of cream of botulism or salmonella noodle.
Ooh.
I'm walking out of the diner and I'm finding another place to eat. Okay. And that's how I feel of our presidential election. I'm not happy with the choices. I will probably be casting my protest libertarian vote. I am one of those because I just don't want to decide which side of the aisle I give power over that are in the Constitution. I will probably protest by taking Chase Oliver, but I did vote for Biden.
Yeah, that's right.
In 1988.
That's good.
So, but getting back to the philosophy of tight end, here's the biggest mistake I see people making in fantasy football at the tight end position. They're in a tight end premium league, Professor.
Okay, you do have just a couple paragraphs on tight end premium. Okay.
Tight end premium league, and they treat any tight end as if they're a bargain just because it's tight end premium, and they move him up several rounds. You move Kelsey up, you move Kincaid up, you move McBride, you move Andrews, you move Laporta, and you move Hawkinson when he's healthy. You don't move anybody else. Maybe a George Kittle moves up a little bit versus the Ingrams, Njokus, the Freiermuths of the world. Tight end premium is based on receptions. If it was multiplying all of the tight end premium points made and was multiplying that by a 1.5 factor or doubling the points.
Imagine 12 points for a touchdown instead of 6. Oh, correct. Yeah. You'd be drafting every tight end you could as much as possible. Yeah.
But a tight end that only catches 50 or 60 passes a year, that isn't enough to move him up as far as people do in tight end premium leagues. Tight end premium leagues, 2 tight end leagues, I want an elite tight end even more than I do in a 1 tight end league. And you know how much I want an elite guy. Yeah. I will pay to get Kelsey in the second. I will pay Kincaid in the second. And it just matters who I draft depends on where my draft position was.
What about dynasty for tight ends? You talk about that in your article.
Yeah, I'd love having.
Is it the elite early, or are you going for the rookies like the Bowers and squirrel away and hope that he comes through, or
one of both? One of both.
So you try both.
I try to get both. So what I do in tight end in 1 tight end leagues, whether it's premium or not, in dynasty, is in a dynasty startup, I will take an old goat. I'll take Kelsey or Andrews because people are going to let them slip a few rounds later than they should, and they're going to overdraft Laporta, Kincaid, McBride, and Bowers. Bowers hasn't done anything yet, folks. Bowers is on a bad offense. I don't know
what team is he on.
He's on Las Vegas. Don't know what to do with it.
It's going to be lean there. I mean, Devontae Adams, you can make a living there. You're not going to be high on the hog, but at the right price. But after that, you're thinking, okay, what's left?
Yeah, and that's exactly the Las Vegas and here's the thing, Professor. I know it's rare for somebody in fantasy football to look at a player and say, I don't know how good he's going to be.
We don't.
We all have to be 100% sure about every single player in the league, right? No. I refuse to do that. I refuse to do that. But in Dynasty, I will overpay for one of the old guys. And this year, I would take a guy like Sanders with Carolina, who's a rookie. I don't have any problem with drafting a rookie. And then you stash him on your taxi squad. A strategy I've used a lot, though, is I'll take a Kelsey early. I'll take him earlier than anybody else. But that still means in a dynasty startup, even in 1 quarterback, I'm probably getting him in the 4th or 5th round, believe it or not, or later. It's almost like a game of chicken taking Kelsey in a dynasty startup because everybody knows he's got at least 2 more years of being a really good tight end. And somebody wants to have that on their team. On one league, I took Kelsey really early. I took him like the 4th round in a super flex even. Took him real early. Took Jared Wiley, the rookie that Kansas City drafted. Took him late. Now, if Wiley is good, I've got the next generation in Kansas City, and we know they love to use their tight ends. The other strategy I like to do is reach for a guy and then stash him on my taxi squad. Like David Njoku, when he was a rookie, when he was a second-year player, nobody wanted him. He was available. I grabbed him on some of my dynasty teams, stashed him on the taxi squad. Last year, I did the same thing with both Luke Musgrave and Green Bay's other rookie tight end that they had last year, Tucker Kraft. And so I got those guys and I stashed them on a taxi squad. I may or may not bring them out. Jelani Woods is another guy who I have stashed on the taxi squad.
And I grabbed him, I think, before you took over, or maybe we took him the first year you were.
Yep.
And the reason I like Indianapolis because they like to use those tight ends in the red zone.
Yep. So he's healthy. He might be a bargain. Later in the draft, I'll take Chiggy.
So you're taking 3 in Dynasty?
I'm taking 3 in Dynasty. I want at least 3 on my roster because, and quite often I will take, like, I'll have maybe 4. And one of them is a guy.
If you've got a taxi, I would say sure.
Taxi, I might stash 2 guys on the taxi squad if they're young players. The key is I want as much flexibility at tight end as I can get in Dynasty because they're also great trade pieces. If they do hit. And guys I like later, Noah Fant, I would take a shot at him in all formats this year. If I miss on an early tight end in redraft or in best ball, I've got some Noah Fant in best ball all day long. He was the only tight end left of the veterans in Seattle. Doesn't mean that somebody else won't come in and take up some of those snaps, but I like his chance of breaking through. Theo Johnson with the Giants is another guy that I've drafted a lot of this year and stashed on my taxi squad. Greg Dulcich from Denver and Lucas Kroll from Denver. There's a name that a lot of people probably don't even know who he is. And Ben Sinnott with Washington. Those are guys you grab and put on your taxi squad, just like a couple years ago I did with Kate Otten with Tampa Bay. And I did with the guy by the name of Trey McBride, who wasn't much thought of his rookie year. So the key is I'll sometimes have 2. If I've got a 6-man taxi squad, I'll have maybe 2 of those as developmental tight ends in the first 2 years. But at tight end, in 1 tight end leagues, whether they're premium or not, I want elite tight end. Doesn't mean I'll overdraft too much. I'm not going to take Kelsey or Kincaid or Laporta in the first round, end of the first round. I'll let them come around to me. But once that first tight end is taken, I'm hoping I grab one of the next 2. That's sort of the strategy that I'm going to be using this year. If I miss on them, though, I've got a lot of sleepers late, and I'll take 2 of them. I'll take maybe Jelani Woods and Freiermuth, or I'll take Freiermuth and Okonkwo, or I'll take Noah Fant and Jelani Woods, or Noah Fant and Freiermuth. Freiermuth is a guy I love at his value right now. He is a bargain because I think he could play back to his rookie year. He's going in the 9th round right now. So I like his.
He is going in the 8th round.
8th round. So
they
he's
have
moving up.
Moved up.
So they're catching
But
on.
Hawkinson is still in the 9th round, and
And,
Schultz is in the 9th round.
and that's another strategy that I fully approve of this year is taking Hawkinson and
And
then
somebody.
coming right back with another one. Or I might even go with, say, an Njoku in the 6th,
And then Hawkinson.
then Hawkinson in the 8th. Or take Hawkinson and Freiermuth back to back if they're available. It all depends on where you are in the draft. If I'm on the turn at that 8-9 turn or that 7-8 turn, I might have the opportunity to take both Freiermuth and Hawkinson. Then I'm set at tight end.
Mhm.
I don't know how many games Hawkinson's going to miss. But I do know this, Professor. I'm fairly confident he's going to play the last 6 games of the season.
If they're competitive, you bet.
What happens in the last 6 weeks of the regular NFL season? We have our fantasy football playoffs.
That's right. And he crushed it pretty good last year until he got hurt.
If you have an elite tight end that you grabbed in the 8th round, ninth round,
that's gravy.
that's gravy. So
in best ball, Dennis, I'm grabbing him and as my tight end too.
Yep.
And being greedy and rubbing my feelers together when I grab him. And then I'm taking your Jelani Woods, Juwan Johnson, some of those types, maybe even Ertz in the like 18th round. That's just free. Some of those way late as my 3rd in best ball. So I'll have maybe even I've been able to put down like an elite, like a Kelsey, Hawkinson, and then an Ertz or something like that.
That's a perfect
I've been
strategy.
doing good.
That's
Because Ertz, I think, will go good early, and then maybe Sanat takes over. That's fine because I'm hoping Hawkinson steps up. I mean, it's kind of like it's a relay, and I'm thinking kind of the relay to where Ertz takes over. Gives it to Sanat. He settles back and he's going to fight and then Hawkinson steps up, and I've already got Kelsey, which we know should get you 8 nice, maybe even more tight end. Kelsey's calm last year was, let's see, where was he at? Second round. 73. So basically 70% of the weeks. So what is that? Whatever 70% of 17 games is, what is that? 7, 12, 13? Yeah, I'll take 13 weeks at above median for Kelsey. I'll collect that all day. That's like double, that's like super compound interest on my bonds there. I like that.
And that was a down year.
Yeah, and that was a down year. Year before, his calm was in the 100s. I mean, he was kicking butt almost every week.
He got hurt before the season, missed the first week, wasn't healthy until later in the year, and they really managed his usage.
Yes.
They kept him out of plays. He had a lower snap count percentage than I've ever seen for that guy because he's an Iron Man. He never comes out of games. He wasn't playing.
No, he wasn't.
They were targeting him early in the season when they needed first downs.
Yep.
And this year, assuming he doesn't get hurt dancing on stage with Taylor Swift, he comes into the season healthy. And the crazy thing, and this is just one of those weird statistical anomalies. It doesn't mean anything. His even numbered years, Professor, have been better than his odd numbered years the last 6 seasons.
Yeah, but you got to have that love boat factor. Come on, Dennis. Yeah, you got to have 2 weeks. If she shows up, come on. That's a slam. He gets a touchdown those weeks.
There
and
you
know that they're still together. At least they were a couple of weeks ago. You figure that she's going to try to go see more of him. So those are just touchdowns in your pocket.
And
I'm telling you.
so far,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I can't believe people have done this analysis, but they have.
Mhm.
Her schedule
Mhm.
will allow her to be at 14 of his 17 regular
Oh,
season
man,
games this
that's
year.
money in the pocket. There it
So
is.
gotta like that opportunity. But no, in best ball, I love this is the last thing I'm going to say on the tight end strategy. In best ball, I love your theory of elite, middle ground, and the middle ground guy is
That's what I've
Hawkinson
been
this year.
doing. Mhm.
That's Hawkinson is the middle ground guy
Yep.
this year. And if you miss on Hawkinson, then it's probably Freiermuth is my next guy in that middle group. So
Right.
it's early, it's middle, and it's late.
Yeah.
That's what I like to do in tight end. Now, if I miss on
Yeah.
the early, it usually means I went a little early on quarterback and I got two elite quarterbacks. Then I might go 4 tight ends. If
Mhm.
I'm rolling the dice,
I
but
like it.
Hawkinson has been a big part of the strategy this year
Yep.
in best ball, and he'll be my strategy in redraft because even if I do draft a Kelsey or a Kincaid,
Yep.
8th round, 9th round, if I can grab Hawkinson,
9th round right now.
I'm okay with that. Could you imagine a tight end premium league and you go into the fantasy football playoffs with Kelsey and Hawkinson?
That'd be sweet.
I think it's a good strategy. So anyway,
Yep.
um,
I agree.
so head on over to the scienceoffantasyfootball.com. You could take a look at my article. And hey, next week, folks, we've got a special treat for you because we're going to
Uh-oh.
go inside the professor's data lab
Uh-oh.
and break down some data. And we're also going to talk strategy ahead of the Scott Fish Bowl because I want to pick the professor's brain
Uh-oh.
before I go into my Scott Fish Bowl draft. But
It's about picked out,
there you go. So head over to the scienceoffantasyfootball.com. I've got some more articles that'll be popping up there. The professor's got some great lesson plans to learn from.
Yep.
And head back here next week for another edition of the Science of Fantasy Football.
Get to work, folks.